champagne music of Lawrence Welk.
Lawrence Welk. His bubbly personality, broken English, and big band rhythms made him the maestro of Middle America.
He had it, whatever it is.
By his own admission, Lawrence Welk was neither a musical genius nor innovator. His real talent was orchestrating a unique bond with his fans. That mutual loyalty kept him on the air for over 4 decades, making his show the longest-running musical program in television history.
Wonderful, wonderful.
The man was, I don't know, he was just meant to be. He was just meant to be.
His life is the American dream put to music. For where else could a sickly, self-doubting son of immigrants, with $3 in his pocket and an accordion around his neck, rise to become the nation's most popular band leader?
You just can't imagine what he came from. Only in America could it happen. Somebody could come from absolutely nothing to be so famous. It was almost unbelievable. I think he thought it was too.
From the beginning, music was Lawrence Welk's destiny. His very first memory was of crawling across the floor of his family's sod farmhouse towards his father, who held out his accordion. Baby Lawrence experienced delight and wonder, pressing his little fingers on the keys. As the faint notes squeezed out, Lawrence heard his future calling. But no one, until Lawrence Welk, dared dream of becoming a musician in Strasburg, North Dakota, the town where he was born on March 11, 1903. Lawrence was the 6th of 8 children in the family of Ludwig Welk and his wife Christina. His parents had immigrated to the United States in 1893 from Odessa, Russia, where they were part of a tight-knit German community. Many of its members, including the Welks, journeyed to America seeking a new life, but steadfastly held on to their old-world traditions. As a result, Strasburg resembled its namesake in Russia more than it did a Midwestern American town. Everyone spoke German, feared God, and farmed the land. They accepted that life was a struggle, and merely to survive was an act of faith. This austere worldview was reflected in the bleak Dakota landscape. For a man whose music was likened to the bubbly effervescence of champagne, the boyhood of Lawrence Welk was a sobering experience.
Very often it was so cold that when he got up in the morning to wash, the water in the basin would be frozen. He would have to break it up before and warm it in his hands before there was enough to wash with. And I frankly have always marveled that this man who was a free spirit and had this joy and this artistic sense within himself was born in surroundings like that.
As a boy, Lawrence believed he was inferior to the other members of his family and that he would never amount to anything. Shy, skinny, and awkward, he called himself Dummeressel, or dumbass, an opinion shared by his teasing siblings.
I think it took him many, many years to get over that, but it also created a vulnerability, and if I may say so, a sensitivity as well, that enabled him to be unusually, acutely sensitive to other people and to his audiences.
It became apparent early on that a boy as sensitive as Lawrence was not cut out for farm work. The barnyard smells offended him. The slaughtering of animals turned his stomach. Most of all, he hated milking cows. His escape from such chores was music. It was his one joy in life. At night, his family gathered around to hear his father play the pump organ or the accordion while his mother sang. To Lawrence, music was home.
Lawrence's background, of course, was German, and here's one of the little German songs he always used to sing, Du, du liegst mit dem Herzen, du.
It did not occur to Lawrence that he could be a professional musician. He was expected to become a farmer just like his father. His future was set until one night in 1914 when a case of peritonitis, or blood poisoning, set in after his appendix ruptured. Lawrence was rushed to the hospital. Delirious with fever, he dreamt that he was soaring like a hawk. When he came to, nurses found him clawing the walls. They were concerned, but he was ecstatic. Lawrence considered the dream a turning point, interpreting it as a second chance at life. Lawrence spent a year convalescing and had to leave school. At home, he lay in bed, looking at his father's accordion, longing to play it. After a couple of months, he did. The more he taught himself, the more he believed that just maybe he could be a musician. It would be that dream come true. At 17, Lawrence made a bold decision. He would make music his life. He began to play polkas and waltzes at barn dances in his spare time. At one, he saw a musician play the first piano-type accordion he'd ever seen. He admired its beauty and the clarity of its tone. He had to have one. Lawrence worked up the courage to ask his father for the $400 he needed to buy the accordion. It was a fortune to a boy used to getting an allowance of only 10 cents a year. Lawrence made his father a deal. He promised to work on the farm and turn over all the money he made performing at social functions until he was 21. After careful consideration, his father agreed. As Lawrence began to pay his debt, he sometimes wondered if it were the fear of pushing a plow for the rest of his life or the love of music that spurred him on.
He told the story. He had the bales of hay out on the farm in North Dakota and he used to put pitchforks in them. And he'd stand there as a teenager and direct it. Now, if that's not saying you're destined to be a band leader, I don't know what it is.
4 years later, on his 21st birthday, Lawrence Welk kept his promise to his father. The accordion was paid for in full. The young man was poised to pursue his career in music. His prospects were not promising. He had only $3 in his pocket, a fourth-grade education, and no formal musical training. Worst of all, he spoke no English. His father had doubts, big ones.
His father told him, if I'm right, you guys, that if you can go out and make money, and you can do that, all right, but if not, you are back on the farm. You have to prove this to me.
There was no way Lawrence was going back to the farm. He had to prove to himself that Wunnerful could amount to something. He left home in a horse and buggy, but inside he was soaring like a hawk. When Lawrence Welk left home in 1924, he embarked on a musical odyssey that would take him from barns to ballrooms to broadcasting.
When he started television, people said he was an overnight sensation. That wasn't strictly true. He learned the essentials of entertaining people by touring one-nighters for 30 years.
The first of those 30 years was the toughest for Lawrence. He was self-conscious of his German accent and naive in the ways of the world. When work was scarce, he slept in cars and cornfields. Sometimes he went to sleep hungry. The first job of note came in the fall of 1924. Lincoln Bolds, an orchestra leader from Chicago, heard Lawrence play and invited him to join his band. It didn't last long. Lawrence left when Bolds missed one too many paydays. But steady money came soon in the form of George T. Kelly. The affable Irishman saw Lawrence perform at a fair in South Dakota and offered him work in his troupe, the Peerless Entertainers. It was the turning point of Lawrence's professional life.
It wasn't until he hooked up with George T. Kelly that I think he could see a direction for himself. Because I think George T. Kelly was a consummate entertainer and showman. And my dad could sit back and learn from George T. Kelly.
Kelly shared the spotlight with Lawrence, billing him as the world's foremost accordionist.
Well, until Lawrence got that accordion on, he was absolutely stage fright. But when you strapped that on, he was absolutely at home.
Kelly taught Lawrence everything about putting on a show, from promotion to performance, from playing what the audience wanted to hear to leaving them wanting more. Offstage, Mrs. Kelly was his tutor.
Mrs. Kelly, you helped Lawrence with his English, didn't you?
Oh, yes.
That's right.
And this wonderful boy, he used to bring me gifts showing his appreciation in hundreds of ways.
It was a peerless education, even if Lawrence had to pay for it by occasionally playing a Spanish matador with a German accent.
I was supposed to be the funny man. Well, you remember, Lawrence? You talked so broken that you were getting all the laughs, and I was just doing the trick.
Lawrence received something more than on-the-job training from George T. Kelly. Something he never had before, the self-confidence to succeed.
I really believe if it wouldn't have been for George, with all of his teaching that he gave me, that I could have never made it.
Lawrence left the Peerless Entertainers in 1927 to form his first significant group, the Welk Novelty Orchestra, so named because each of its members played several instruments and sounded like a band twice its size. A chance stop in Yankton, South Dakota would be their lucky break. There, WNAX, a radio station located on the top floor of the Gurney Seed and Nursery Company, hired them on the spot. They were an instant success. Radio, too, was a novelty in those days, and people came to watch the band perform on the air. At one broadcast, Lawrence noticed the prettiest girl he had ever seen sitting in the audience. She was Fern Renner, a student nurse at a nearby hospital. Lawrence asked Fern for a date. She agreed, but only if they went on a double date.
My mother had always said, as we were growing up, entertainers don't amount to much. They have no roots anywhere or anything. And I didn't expect the fine, upright, substantial human being he was. He was such an honest man and had so much integrity. And this was a complete surprise to me.
Their courtship was a long-distance one. Fern remained in Yankton, committed to nursing, while Lawrence pursued his career on the road. Radio exposure had made Lawrence and his orchestra local celebrities. Requests poured in for them to play throughout the region. They toured a chain of ballrooms across the Midwest billed as America's biggest little band. Some halls were so cold that they wore their coats and gloves on stage. And somewhere under all that snow is their tour bus. Performing one-nighters was grueling, but Lawrence didn't mind. His dream of becoming a professional musician was coming true. He was still self-conscious about his English and rarely spoke to the audience, but his enthusiastic polka playing did the talking for him.
This next polka, the clarinet polka, is one of the most popular of all the traditional polkas, and Lawrence used to love to dance to this.
At one stop in South Dakota, Lawrence inspired a young Myron Florin the way he had been inspired years earlier.
I was about 8 or 9 years old. We went to hear Lawrence Welk, and I was so taken with Lawrence and his accordion. I sat on the edge of the stage and watched the show all evening. And at that time, I was playing a little button box accordion. And I kept after my folks to get me a piano accordion like Lawrence Welk was playing. We couldn't afford it until I was about 15. Then my dad got into politics. And he was elected a county treasurer of Day County, South Dakota. And I got my first piano accordion.
The Welk Novelty Orchestra ventured east to expand their audience. The Depression was on. Money was tight, and no one there was in the mood to do the polka. The tour failed, and Lawrence was greatly disappointed. His breakthrough to the big time would have to wait. He returned to the Midwest, taking solace in being reunited with Fern. Lawrence invited her to visit while he played the Broadmoor Club in Colorado.
He picked me up, and we drove up around the mountains, and we were talking, and on the way back, he said, Fern, he said, do you smoke or drink? I said, oh, no, I don't do either. He said, that's great. He said, I would never marry anyone who smokes or drinks. And before I went back, he proposed to me, and we set a date.
They were married on April 18th, 1931, in Sioux City, Iowa, at 5:30 in the morning. The only time and place their schedules allowed. Their witnesses? A bunch of sleepy-eyed musicians. The newlyweds lived life on the road.
I traveled with him until the children came. I didn't believe in negative on all this, because I knew when I married him what his business was, and I knew that the road wouldn't be smooth.
The road hit a rough spot when Lawrence's band suddenly quit on him. He was holding them back, they argued. His poor English, the failure of the Eastern Tour, and the grind of playing one-nighters in the sticks convinced them that he would never make it in show business. Lawrence was so despondent, he seriously considered returning to the family farm. After several sleepless nights, he vowed to start over. Fern likened him to a cork in water. If you put Lawrence down in one place, he'd pop up in another. He immediately formed a new band, the Hotsy Totsy Boys. Their most memorable engagement almost didn't happen. They drove all the way from South Dakota to Phoenix, Arizona, only to find the ballroom they were to play had closed. Desperate, Lawrence pawned his diamond ring to pay for food and lodging. Then he convinced the ballroom manager to open his doors, promising to cover any losses. There were none. The engagement was a success. Lawrence even earned enough money to buy back his ring from the pawn shop. Returning to the Midwest, Lawrence sought to improve his fortunes. It was the mid-1930s, the dawn of the big band era, and Lawrence wanted to be part of it. Many of the orchestras at the time had corporate sponsors. When Lawrence couldn't find one, he became his own. He bought wholesale lots of an exotic-sounding chewing gum to sell at engagements. Thus, the Hotsy Totsy Boys became the Honolulu Fruit Gum Orchestra. Wherever they played, they held Miss Honolulu Fruit Gum contests. To vote, one had to buy a pack. They made more money selling gum than by playing music. It was a boon to the band, but a bust to ballroom managers who complained about all the gum that was stuck to their walls and floors. It was aloha and a setting sun for the Honolulu Fruit Gum Orchestra. But Lawrence did not give up, even when his will was critically tested. After a one-nighter, his tour bus ran off the road, injuring several bandmates and destroying all their instruments. Lawrence believed the accident was a sign that he should quit show business. Only the reassuring words of a priest, who convinced him that music is a joy and to share it as a gift, could keep him from giving up. His faith restored, Lawrence persevered. He got a momentous break playing the William Penn Hotel in Pittsburgh. Fan mail to his radio broadcasts from there consistently described his music as sparkling, light, and effervescent. It wasn't long before Lawrence got the moniker that would make him and his distinctive sound famous. On New Year's Eve 1938, the champagne music of Lawrence Welk debuted in the Italian terrace of the William Penn Hotel. The band was called the Champagne Music Makers, and the singer, the Champagne Lady. They even had a machine blowing bubbles while they played.
Lawrence's theme song was called Bubbles in the Wine, and I still remember Lawrence saying, Don't laugh at the bubbles. There's money in every one.
Lawrence worked hard for that money. The Champaign music makers toured nonstop, driving by car caravan to play one-nighters at theaters and ballrooms, mostly in the Midwest.
Lawrence dressed in the front of the car, and I dressed in the back of the car. There was no place else, you know. These ballrooms were just boxes out in the middle of a field and the little house behind there. And Lawrence and I had a cold all the time. It's a wonder we didn't have pneumonia.
They played for everyone from farmers to city slickers to soldiers back from World War II. Lawrence also performed before the cameras. Long before he became a familiar face on television, he filmed several soundies, or musical shorts, the precursor of the music video. Compared to the band leaders who defined the era, Lawrence lacked the virtuosity of Benny Goodman and the originality of Duke Ellington. But Lawrence had something those giants did not, something more valuable than talent, a gift for bonding with people through music.
He'd go in the little stores in these little towns and buy a shirt or something, and he'd say, my band's playing out on the highway, you know, out a few miles from here. You're coming to our dance, aren't you? Well, the shoe man would be there, or the shirt man would be there. He had a bond with the working people. He used to say to us, these people worked real hard for their money, and we're going to make sure that they get their money's worth because they came to dance and see our band. He loved the people, and people loved Lawrence.
The people's love for Lawrence would soon catapult him to television stardom. During the big band era, Lawrence Welk developed a stage presence that would make him famous to millions of TV viewers. What you saw was what you got, an outgoing band leader who was really a very shy man. When he performed, he rarely spoke and frequently stayed in the background. He still insisted that between his heavy German accent and broken English, no one would understand him. Until a ballroom manager offered him $3,500 a week to speak during a show. For that amount, Lawrence joked, he wouldn't shut up. At first, he made many mistakes. Once he introduced his band as the Shampoo Music Makers. Another time, he asked his singer to step up to the microscope. The audience loved what became known as Welkisms, and Lawrence became even more popular. The big band era reached its height in the 1940s. By then, Lawrence was looking to settle down in a place where he could perform regularly and raise his family. The Trianon in Chicago, one of the most beautiful ballrooms of the era, became Lawrence's base while he and Fern put down roots and brought up their 3 children in the suburb of River Forest.
At home, I think it was a little uncomfortable for him in those days because I think he felt probably a little guilty about not being there all the time. I think in a way it would have been something he would have loved to have had a better working relationship with the family. But when he came home, he was always trying to please us, which was okay with us too.
The Welk children got to see their father at work when they joined him on his summer tours.
Traveling with my father in the summertime was wonderful. It was a lot of fun to be in a different place every night. I realize it must have been very difficult for my mother as we traveled and for her to do the wash in the bathtub if there wasn't a laundromat. I can appreciate now that I've been a mother what it's like, but for the children we were clueless. We just had fun.
I was always surprised between the perception of glamour that the fans had and the reality of the dirt, the grime, and the fatigue that accompanied our travels. And I thought it was a very hard life for my father. I remember being very proud of him. I was always a bit wondering at how adoring the fans could be, since I thought, you know, he's just my dad, after all. I did think, however, that the fathers of my friends, my girlfriends, seemed quite boring. in comparison.
I did see a side of my father when he would perform that we didn't see at home. I saw a glow in him, even in the early days as a child. Looking up there, you could tell he just loved what he was doing. And he would get more happiness out of standing up on a stage, interfacing with an audience, than almost anything.
As the 1950s approached, Lawrence was getting restless. He had spent years building his reputation until he succeeded in playing some of the finest ballrooms in the country. But the big band era was fading out, and Lawrence sought something new. He found it in May 1951 on a West Coast tour. KTLA, a local television station in Los Angeles, aired Lawrence's show from the Aragon Ballroom in Santa Monica. The next day, he was mobbed. In one evening, he had reached more people on TV than he had in weeks of touring, or even on radio. Television was what Lawrence Welk had been looking for. He wrote to Fern to put their River Forest home up for sale and come immediately with the family.
I was reticent. I was not one to pull up stakes wildly and go. And I said to Lawrence, look, if it is the place for you, Los Angeles, when you're out there for a little while, you could tell, I'll move.
Fern moved within months. Lawrence was such a success on KTLA that by 1955, Dodge Cars, the show's sponsor, wanted him on national TV. They pitched him to the ABC network. Executives there were interested but proposed changes.
They would have liked to have been more grand and opened with a line of dancing girls and then maybe had a full-time comedian on. And my dad always felt, this is not who I am, this is not what I do, and this isn't how I entertain my audience. And if that's what you want, I think you have a different show in mind.
The executives backed down. Lawrence got the show he wanted. It was a big risk. There was nothing else like it on network television. On the morning of July 2nd, 1955, Lawrence walked into ABC studios in Hollywood to find a barely controlled panic on the rehearsal stage. Within hours, his show was to make its network debut. These were the days of live TV. There were no retakes. Shows aired coast to coast, mistakes and all. Everyone was nervous.
It was an exciting night, of course. But I think Lawrence read his cue cards constantly all day long. It was a big moment as to whether or not it would be a success.
The champagne music of Lawrence Welk.
It was sort of scary when he first went on national TV.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Having watched my dad for years, he was so natural in front of a live audience. And on TV, it just seemed so stilted, you know, that for me, it was a little bit uneasy watching it.
Thank you, my good friends, and a pleasant hello. It's indeed a pleasure to be with you, and we'd like to express our thanks to the Dodge Dealers of America for giving us this opportunity to play for you. We're very happy about it, so may we say it with music. 1, 2.
The program duplicated the joyous mood and musical variety of Lawrence's ballroom shows. Alice Long, the Champagne Lady, sang. The audience danced. Lawrence even did a polka with a fan. And of course, he played his accordion.
Back to champagne music. I know if I don't play a solo or accordion for my friends in North Dakota, I'm going to be in trouble with them. And Myron, would you join me with your pan accordion, please? The 12th Street Rag. 1, 2, and
When Lawrence and I played that 12th Street Rag on that first show, I said, boy, this is it. I don't imagine Lawrence was any more excited than I was about it. But I had the feeling that this was going to go on and on and on.
We hope you had a little fun, and we hope we can have you with us again next week. And now so long from all of the champagne music makers.
There was euphoria backstage when the show was over, but the reviews were mixed. Many questioned whether an orchestra sitting in front of a TV camera could capture a viewing audience. The single-digit ratings were not promising either.
It took a while for the public to catch on to it. I used to sit back in Michigan, and people would say, "How in the world did you ever decide to sponsor that show?" And I would say, and we'd be watching the show, and I'd say, "As soon as you quit tapping your feet there and enjoying it, I'll tell you why we did it."
The show's ratings steadily climbed. By the end of the summer, they were in the high 20s. Lawrence's show was a hit. Nothing could burst his bubbles now. The Lawrence Welk Show became one of the most popular TV programs of the 1950s. To maintain its success, Lawrence added musical performers to the lineup. The first ones were discovered by his son, Larry. They were 4 sisters from Venice, California, the eldest of whom was his classmate. Larry had heard them sing at an Elks Club and hastily arranged for them to audition for his father at home. After hearing just one song, Lawrence knew he had to have them on his show. They made their first appearance on The Lawrence Welk Show on Christmas Eve, 1955.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Lennon Sisters.
He can turn the tide and calm the angry sea.
The Lennon sisters became the most popular singers on the show. Their sweet harmonies and wholesome appearance perfectly embodied the image Lawrence wanted his cast to project. Both on and off stage, he referred to them as his musical family, and they in turn looked to him as the patriarch.
We really fell in love with him in so many ways as a father or a grandfather or whatever, because he was so much fun. He was very warm, very generous, very giving, very loving to you in so many ways. But then he also was a real taskmaster. I mean, even as children we knew that. You were on time. You were dressed the way you were supposed to be dressed. You knew your song. And he was tough. He was really tough.
Lawrence was tough, but that's what it took to please his audience, Middle America. He knew what they wanted, good, clean entertainment, and did everything he could to give it to them, right down to the last detail. He rejected cigarette and beer advertising, even though he was the champagne music maker. He also deleted suggestive lyrics from songs and even supervised wardrobe selection.
He was very, very strict when it came to a low-cut gown, and there were times, I mean, it was a joke. I mean, if certain women on the show had their cleavage showing at all, the wardrobe would yell, you know, get a flower, get a bouquet, depending on the size of the woman, you know, get a garden.
Some performers quit over Lawrence's decisions. Many critics called the show corny, but Lawrence remained firm. His show was the result of a formula he had spent 30 years perfecting, performing one-night stands. What worked in a ballroom worked on national TV. Keep it simple, light, pleasant, and moving, just like champagne. But more than the music or the format, it was Lawrence to whom the fans responded. He endeared himself to them with his unabashed enthusiasm, folksy charm, and of course his Welkisms, from a one and a two to Wunnerful or Wonderful. Everyone has their favorite.
There was the time that he introduced the Duke Ellington's song as Take the Train, and then of course the one where he introduced a medley of songs made famous during World War I.
I still remember him saying things like, you know, there's good days and bad days, and this is one of them.
He was talking to Joanne Castle, and she was doing something, and he said, you know, Joanne, he said, a lot of people like your playing, but you know, I got a letter the other day from this man, and he said you just weren't his cup of dish.
Because he had a broken English, I think was an asset. It was nice to see a guy in the 50s and 60s with an accent on television. You didn't see that much. You didn't see that at all. And I think because he had an accent, he was an American with an accent. Isn't that neat?
Lawrence Welk's show continued its successful run through the 1960s. However, by decade's end, two events would test Lawrence's cork-like resilience. The first occurred in 1968 when the Lennon sisters departed the show. Ever since their debut in 1955, they had become America's sweethearts, the favorite of viewers who had watched them grow from adolescent girls to married women on the Lawrence Welk Show. Now the viewers watched the Lennons leave.
We were having these wonderful opportunities to go out and make a lot more money than we were making on the Welk Show, because Mr. Welk's policy was that he paid union scale. And that was his policy. We all knew it.
And we were 12 years still.
And we didn't want to leave the show because we were so loyal to him and we loved everybody there. But here were these opportunities. So we went to him and we asked for more money. And he turned us down. So we said, you know, we're really sorry, but we have to move on.
That was difficult at the time for my dad to accept, because I think he felt that their success was so closely associated with the way he had brought them along. And I think that did cause a strain. But that strain actually went away, and I think my dad was very proud of the girls.
The departure of the Lennons, though sad, was not final. However, the other event that challenged Lawrence would be. ABC canceled his show after a 16-year run.
My dad was devastated when the television show was canceled in 1971. His ratings were very strong, so it was hard for him to understand, why would my show be canceled when there's so many people that want to see it?
ABC's answer was that Lawrence's audience was too old to attract sponsors looking for younger viewers. Immediately, Lawrence's loyal fans inundated him with thousands of letters of support. Among them were requests from television stations to air his show. Within a week of his cancellation, Lawrence arranged to syndicate his program to over 250 stations, more outlets than ABC had affiliates. Newspapers referred to them as the Welk Network.
Welcome to the Lawrence Welk Show.
The show aired unchanged and uninterrupted for another 11 years. Lawrence ceased production in 1982. It was his decision to stop. At the age of 79, Lawrence felt it was time to step down from his bandstand. But there was cause for celebration. Lawrence's show had been on the air for 27 consecutive years, making it the longest-running musical program in the history of television. Lawrence Welk did not stay idle after his retirement from television. He went to his office daily to oversee his recording and publishing interests, as well as a profit-sharing plan he started for members of his musical family. He also presided over an impressive real estate empire in California that included prime ocean view property in Santa Monica and a vacation resort in Escondido. After Bob Hope, Lawrence was the second wealthiest performer in show business. Wunnerful had turned out to be a pretty smart kid after all. But conducting music, not business, was Lawrence's real love. Instead of performing for millions, he now played only at intimate gatherings of TV friends and family. Kathy Lennon had an especially poignant reunion with Lawrence when she visited him on Christmas Eve, 1991.
He said, "Oh, little Kathy," he said, "come with me." And he walked over, and he could not see real well towards the end of his life, so he walked over, kind of felt over, and went over and sat at the piano. And he said, "Please sing for me." And I sang Ave Maria, and he started accompanying, and he started playing the piano, and he just became young. He became alive and young, and Mrs. Welk was crying, and I was crying, and it was just a very special, special time. And here we started with him on Christmas Eve, and this was his last Christmas Eve.
Lawrence Welk died peacefully at his home on May 17, 1992. He had been suffering from pneumonia. His family was at his bedside.
It was really such a marvelous experience and such a privilege to be there, because I had the feeling when he died that his body just fell away and that his joyous spirit was with us again.
Lawrence's joyous spirit was present in the music played at his funeral.
They had a Dixieland band play, and it was wonderful because Lawrence Welk, Dixieland was #1, and so they had Dixieland music. I thought that was wonderful. I couldn't stop crying. I'm starting to cry now. I just remembered it.
I miss him to this day, and sometimes I have his picture in a hallway at my apartment. It's a big picture of him, and in the mornings I come out, I say good morning to him. It's so real.
He had had a beautiful life. From his standpoint, it had been a joyful life. And he often told me he did not understand why he was so lucky, that he could do in life what he really wanted to do, what he enjoyed doing, and that when he stood in front of the orchestra and they were playing perfectly, he said he got goose pimples all over.
The legacy of Lawrence Welk lives on in Branson, Missouri, where the Welk Resort and Champagne Theater opened its doors in 1994. There, the Lennon sisters, Joanne Castle, and other members of Lawrence's musical family performed for capacity crowds of faithful fans. Most of them have seen the Lawrence Welk Show only on a small TV screen, but when the curtain rises revealing the LW initials and of course the bubbles, it's a moment that's larger than life. With their laughter, tears, and applause, the audience conjures up the man who epitomized simpler times.
When we're signing autographs after every performance, and especially the girls, the women, and they'll say, you know, every Saturday night, Mom washed our hair and set our hair for church the next morning while we were watching Lawrence Welk. And I mean, it's really a lot of people who say that. It was a ritual every Saturday night.
Right. We still have people to this day coming to us in Branson saying, you know, I'm from, and they have a very thick accent, I'm from Germany, I'm from Vienna. And the first thing that I could understand when I came to the United States was Lawrence Welk Show, because we could understand his accent a little. He played music that we remembered from our homeland, and he was somebody who made it, and it gave us the inspiration to make it. And he became a star, their star.
That would have been music to Lawrence Welk's ears. As he used to say when something pleased him, wonderful, wonderful.